pioneers were Newfoundland servicemen and their young brides, many who'd come all the way from war-torn Europe. This is our tribute to those Cormack pioneers.
Many people are surprised to discover there are places on our rocky isle where the fields are broad and green. Where the soil is rich and fruitful. Such a place is Cormack, out here in western Newfoundland. A settlement that grew out of the ashes of World War II. World War II. Our fellows were in the thick of it. They served with distinction. 6 years of hell, of carnage, death, and destruction. And then it was over. Our troops came home. There was much rejoicing. But it wasn't just servicemen who stepped off the ships in Halifax and St. John's. Thousands of war brides came too. Young women our soldiers and sailors had married overseas. All eager to begin life anew in the bustling and vigorous new world. The 800 or so who arrived in Newfoundland must have suffered a bit of a culture shock, though. Far from the mainstream of North American life, the old colony had just emerged from a depression. The old salt cod fishery was overcrowded and in decline, and there was virtually no industry to take its place. What would the veterans do? How could they make a living for their young families? Since the island was far from self-sufficient in foodstuffs, it seemed like a good idea to encourage some of them to become farmers. An agricultural training program for veterans was established in the demonstration farm in Mount Pearl. And over the next few years, hundreds of young soldiers, sailors, and airmen graduated. No roads then. Veterans with wives and children headed out on the bullet to a new life as farmers, homesteaders in the wilderness. Each couple was given the shell of a small house and 10 acres of roughly cleared land. The rest was up to you. And so the great fields you see in Cormack today were carved from the wilderness by young veterans and their wives. Alice Hewitt was one of the war brides who came to Cormack 50 years ago from Scotland.
I worked in the garden with Alec, alongside Alec. We cleared rocks and that. And then when I got, when I first came, the first 3 of my family, I used to carry Howard up in the garden and put him on a blanket and go weeding with the potatoes or something with him on a patch of ground.
The baby on the blanket has grown now. Howard Hewitt and his brothers have taken over the family farm.
You know, in those days, you know, it had to be a family effort. My mother, you know, drove tractors with Dad and hauled loads of turnips and, you know, and worked side by him bagging potatoes and picking up potatoes and, you know, and they had to. It was, you know, because in the early years, with my mother, the same as other farm women here, you know, the farms couldn't afford hired labor, so it had to be a family effort in order to make, you know, make a success of things.
It's a peaceful place today, But Cormack was even quieter then. A real tonic for a woman who'd seen the horror and known the terror of the bombings.
They couldn't imagine, you know, how noisy it could be, you know. It's awfully nice to see a plane look up the sky and see him going over, but it's not so good when you don't know if he's a friendly one or an enemy, and that's what usually happens sometimes, because when I was stationed at Maryhill Barracks in Glasgow, we were just coming home from, I'd been visiting my aunt, and we saw this plane whipping coming, and my friend said, that looks like a German, and there's no lights on it, and it was. And we flew down to our house, because we didn't live in barracks, we were billeted outside the barracks. And we never got down to the house when bang. And this was the big raid they had on Glasgow that night. And they said 400 German planes over that night, and it started about 5 to 8, and it never left up until 8 the next morning.
From a war to a wilderness, it was quite a change. Though the work was hard and the money scarce in those pioneer days, this land seemed to be teeming with riches for the girl from Edinburgh.
We could get a lot of stuff, you know, off the land. There was rabbits and the moose. And that was something I think I really found was different, you know, because you could pick all the berries that you liked, you know, and make jam, and there was raspberries and blueberries. I don't think anybody would go hungry in Newfoundland if they didn't have any money.
Newfoundland was a far different place then. Roads were few, many communities isolated. In order to enlist for overseas, young men and women in Bombay had to cross the bay ice and the mountains by dog team. That's how Bruce Roberts joined up and served with the Royal Newfoundland Artillery. He fell in love with Margaret in Norfolk, England.
Yeah, where we used to court when I got on holiday.
Wounded in action, Bruce was discharged early. He and his young bride dodged U-boats as they returned from England.
General Haig.
Margaret was only 20 years old when she arrived in Bombay. A couple of years later, she and Bruce began to homestead in the woods of Cormack.
Well, I was just happy to be here, you know, because, well, the war was horrid, and we had each other, and we were just glad to be here, and I could settle anywhere, really. And I just was so glad to be clear of the bombing and everything.
It must have been quite a contrast to see the wilderness compared with Britain.
Oh, yes. But Bruce had told me a lot about it. I mean, I really wasn't surprised about how things were. The house was built, the shell, and we had just our kitchen finished with the wallboard, as that was called then. And we had a range, and I had a 3-month-old baby.
The land was rougher and rockier than they'd expected. Some families soon gave up in despair, but Margaret and Robert clung to their dreams and watched their family grow. After fighting his way through Africa and Italy, Cormack was heaven to soldier Bruce.
We just had plenty of energy. The only thing, I was a bit handicapped then because I was partly disabled where I got so badly burnt. So, you know, I was kind of limited like that.
Now, Margaret says she was glad to escape the war. Were you glad too, in a sense?
Yes, I was glad. I had enough then. I seen all I wanted to see.
So Cormack must have looked like heaven after that.
Oh, yes, pretty peaceful, yes.
Crops were slow in the early years, but gradually the soil began to yield a good harvest. And so did the woods, for the forest was full of moose. Cooking wild meat was something rather different for a girl from England.
At one time I had 3 hearts in the oven stuffed. Moose hearts.
That was something you hadn't seen moose over.
No, and we bottled and bottled it. Yeah, because there's no fridges or anything, no refrigeration. Yeah.
So it was a completely different life for you.
Oh,
women.
yes, yes. But we didn't seem to mind. We had everything we needed. Lots of, especially after we got the cows and everything, and the calves, and we had calves' liver and milk and butter, and we had our own separator, and used to make butter. We had hens, and we had lots of eggs, we had pigs, and geese and ducks.
Despite the lack of electricity, roads and services, Cormack was a land of plenty compared with post-war Britain. Like thousands of others, the Roberts family did their best to help the people back in the war-ravaged old country.
I used to send care packages home. I'd pack big packages for my parents, and canned salmon and butter in cans and tea, and sew it up in canvas or a piece of cloth so that it wouldn't burst, you know, with the weight. You were allowed to send care packages. Yes. Well,
often Bruce and Margaret thumbed through their albums, glancing back to those wartime years, thinking of friends who didn't return, reliving the happy moments when family and friends were reunited, recalling how, as a young family, they started life anew in Cormack. Do you often think back to those days?
Yes, yes. Well, it's good, though. We had a good life.
When we return, we'll continue our story of the Cormack pioneers. The farms of Cormack have changed dramatically in recent years. They're bigger, modern, progressive. You have to look hard to find reminders of those early days. Quite a few of the original settlers are gone now. Their tombstones show what a diverse group they were. From a war to a wilderness, from a sword to a plowshare, it was quite a transition. Take Bert Hillier, for example. He left a fishing village for the battlefields of Europe, then found himself riding a horse and cart in Cormack.
When we came here first, the most we used was horse and cart or wintertime slide, horse and slide, and bicycle.
It must have been strange, after driving tanks through France and sailing battleships through the Mediterranean, to be pedaling bicycles and harnessing horses in Cormack. But that's what they did, those soldier-sailor pioneers.
And this is Gordon Keats, DSM. Art Taylor, he used to be here working in our co-op store.
We come from all over the island.
All across the island. All parts of Newfoundland is represented in this group, as you see here.
And who's this young fellow here?
Oh, that's Bert Hillier. That's the fellow that got no hair on his head right there.
And how old would you have been there?
20 years old.
You were all kids, really?
Oh, we were all kids, yeah.
The pioneers of Cormack. How young they looked, how young they were. From all over the British Isles they came, and from all over Newfoundland. The Roberts family of Bombay, 3 brothers and a sister, served overseas. Of these, 2 settled in Cormack. Bruce, who we've already met, and his sailor boy brother, Gus.
We had the first dairy farm here. We started off, we had, we started off with the sawmill first. We had 1 cow, and then Dad gave me a cow from out to Bombay we brought in there. Her name was Penny. So then we got the idea, I said I'd buy some cows, so we started buying cows and starting raising them and go on. And one day we were running the sawmill and bibbidi bang.
Not all brides were from the British Isles. The majority, in fact, were Newfoundland girls. Gus's wife, Nita, comes from Grand Falls.
But we were really happy. We didn't have very much, not really. But we were happy and we were never bored. Like people will say today, you know, they're so easily bored. But we could always find something to do.
They gave us a horse and a plow and 6 sacks of fertilizer and told us to make a living. And we had to make a living on that alone. We had to survive. So most of the fellas, a lot of fellas went cutting pulpwood and whatever, you know, and done so much pulpwood, and next year they put in a bit of a crop, they cut more pulpwood and they kept going, you know. And they done a very good job there. And they kept her going. And
You liked it here?
oh my God, the only thing, the flies, I always thought they were bad, yeah. Yeah.
They're still bad.
They're still bad, they're no better. I believe we're getting saucier.
Not all war brides were happy in their new home. Many returned. For Mrs. Maura Collahall, who grew up on a farm in Wales, this place, though, held no terror. She was accustomed to livestock and farm life. Yet Cormack was quite different from Wales.
Well, there's no roads in them days to Bombay, and from Rocky Harbour we went across by boat. Then we had to get to the hospital to Bombay. We had to go by a dog's team or something, you know.
Oh, you had to come by dog team?
Oh, yeah, they had dog's team and horses. Oh, yeah. No vehicles. I don't remember no vehicles around.
The winter weather was a bit of a shock to many war brides, yet others didn't mind it. Mrs. Ellen Crocker of the County Mayo in Ireland, for instance, was well accustomed to rural life.
Oh no, I grew up on a farm at home in Ireland. We grew our own sugar and flour, wheat, you know, and sugar beet and everything like that, and brought it to the factory in Ballina and put it into flour and that.
Did you miss the old country?
Oh yes, very much, at the beginning. But you get used to it. And then, of course, I reared my family. They were all born here in Newfoundland.
Did you grow to like this place?
Oh yes, very much, yeah.
You must be proud to look back at what you all accomplished here.
Oh yes, yeah. I never regretted 1 minute of moving from Ireland to here, to Newfoundland.
These are the faces of the Cormack veterans and their wives, taken just 12 years ago. Many of them are gone now. Some probably didn't think of themselves as pioneers. Creating farms from the wilderness was no big deal. But others were proud of what they'd accomplished and wanted their story told. Mrs. Alice Hewitt thought of herself as a pioneer.
Oh, definitely we were pioneers. You couldn't say that we weren't. Because, I mean, the biggest part of Cormack was just a virgin forest. It was just like parachuting us down into this farming settlement and then tell us, now you go and... It was something like, you know, in the olden days, you know, like they trekked across Canada and the States. I came with one returning to this land he called his own. Lovely, lonely Newfoundland, you're now my island home. I have seen your dim blue hills kiss the evening sky. Watch your sparkling lakes grow angry with the fury from on high. As I wake upon a morning and you're all a shimmering white, lovely, lonely Newfoundland, each day I love you more. For I came with one returning To this land he called his own, lovely, lonely Newfoundland. You're now my island home, lovely, lonely Newfoundland. No more this day I'll toil, lovely, lonely Newfoundland. Let me rest beneath your soil, lovely, lonely Newfoundland, my own, my island home.
It's been exactly 50 years since Mrs. Hewitt and the others came to Cormack. And the tradition continues. The clearing, the planting, the weeding, the harvesting. It's quite a legacy inherited by the sons and daughters and now the grandchildren of the pioneers. And so on Armistice Day, a tip of the hat to the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen and their wives, the pioneers of Cormack, who came from a war to a wilderness, who hammered their swords into plowshares.